This galley is for operators only. A rookie rear admiral's voice cut the lunch crowd at Naval Base Coronado. He saw a trespasser, serenely eating. ID. Now. The old man's eyes were peaceful. Infuriated, the admiral barked, "Who the hell do you think you are?" The veteran met his gaze, his voice a quiet rasp. "They used to call me Payback." The admiral's smirk froze. He didn't know he'd just insulted a living legend, or that the chief of naval operations was walking through the door to honor him. Where are you watching this story from? Let us know in the comments. If this journey of valor touched you, consider subscribing to Silent Veterans and help us give a voice to more incredible stories of our silent veterans. The Naval Special Warfare Command dining facility at Naval Base Coronado in San Diego, California, was not like other military cafeterias. It was a sacred space. Small, intimate, reserved exclusively for members of the SEAL teams and their support personnel. The walls were lined with plaques and photographs documenting decades of special operations history. Unit insignias hung with pride. Mission patches told stories of valor. Photos of fallen warriors stared out from their frames, forever young, forever remembered. It was hallowed ground. And Rear Admiral Lower Half Christopher Dayne knew it better than most. He had just pinned on his first star 3 months ago, the youngest SEAL officer to make flag rank in over a decade. At 42 years old, Dayne had commanded SEAL Team 7 through 2 successful deployments in the most dangerous regions of the world. He had earned a Silver Star for valor under fire, and 2 Bronze Stars with valor for actions that saved the lives of his men. He was being groomed for higher command, carefully watched by the senior leadership who saw in him the future of naval special warfare. And Christopher Dayne took that responsibility seriously. Perhaps too seriously, some whispered in the corridors. He was known for his exacting standards, his unwavering discipline, his refusal to accept anything less than perfection from himself or those under his command. On this particular Tuesday afternoon in late autumn, Dayne walked into the dining facility for a quick lunch between back-to-back meetings. The space was moderately crowded, maybe 30 operators and support staff scattered across tables, eating quickly between grueling training evolutions. The conversation was low and professional, the atmosphere relaxed but purposeful. These were America's elite warriors at rest, a brief moment of calm between storms of preparation. That's when Dayne noticed the old man. He sat alone at a corner table near the window, sunlight streaming across his weathered features. He wore a faded red windbreaker that had seen better decades, its color bleached by countless washings and years of California sun. Beneath it, a simple flannel shirt. His jeans were worn at the knees, and his white sneakers looked like they had come from a discount store clearance rack. His hair was white and thin, combed neatly, but unable to hide the passage of time. His face was deeply lined, creased by sun and wind and years beyond counting, each wrinkle a story untold. His hands, wrapped around a simple bowl of soup, showed the unmistakable tremor of advanced age. He was perhaps 82, maybe 83 years old, and he was eating his soup with the serene patience of someone who had nowhere else to be and absolutely nothing to prove to anyone. Dayne stopped mid-stride, his combat-trained mind immediately analyzing the situation. His first instinct told him this was someone's grandfather, brought on base for a family visit, who had wandered into the wrong building. It happened occasionally, family members getting confused during base tours, taking a wrong turn, ending up in restricted spaces. Usually it was harmless, quickly resolved with a polite escort back to the appropriate area. But something about this bothered him. Something wasn't right. The dining facility door was clearly marked with bold letters, "Authorized personnel only, NES WTG-1, Naval Special Warfare Group 1. You didn't accidentally wander in here. You had to intentionally seek it out, pass through multiple security checkpoints, show identification to armed guards." Dayne's jaw tightened. In a post-9/11 world, in facilities where classified operations were planned and executed, security wasn't just important, it was paramount. It was life and death. One breach, one unauthorized person in the wrong place at the wrong time, could compromise operations, endanger lives, destroy missions that took months to plan. He walked over to the table with purposeful strides. The old man didn't look up, didn't acknowledge his approach. He just continued eating his soup with slow, methodical spoonfuls, his trembling hands somehow steady enough to complete the simple task. "Excuse me, sir," Dayne said, his tone professional but firm, the voice of authority he had cultivated over 2 decades of service. "This galley is for operators only. Are you authorized to be here?" The old man paused, his spoon halfway to his mouth. He looked up at Dayne with pale blue eyes that seemed to take in everything and reveal absolutely nothing. They were the eyes of someone who had seen things, done things, experienced things that most people couldn't imagine. But in that moment, they showed only mild curiosity. "I'm having lunch," the old man said quietly. His voice was rough, textured like old leather that had been left too long in the sun. There was a rasp to it, as if years of breathing harsh air in harsh places had worn away the smoothness of youth. "I understand that, sir, but this facility is restricted to naval special warfare personnel, active duty and authorized civilians only. Do you have authorization to be here?" "I have soup." The old man gestured at his bowl with the spoon, a simple statement of fact delivered without irony or challenge. Dayne felt a flash of irritation ripple through him. His morning had been filled with frustrating meetings about budget cuts that threatened training programs, personnel shortages that left teams undermanned, and political pressures that made his job harder every day. He didn't have time for games, didn't have patience for someone who couldn't follow simple rules. "Sir, I need to see your identification. Right now." The old man set down his spoon carefully, as if it were made of crystal rather than steel. He reached into his jacket pocket with trembling hands, a movement that took longer than it should, and pulled out a laminated card. He handed it to Dayne without comment, without protest, without any visible emotion at all. Dayne looked at it, his trained eyes scanning for the relevant information. It was a Department of Defense-dependent ID card, the standard kind issued to military retirees and their families. The photo showed the same weathered face he was looking at now, perhaps taken a few years ago, but still clearly the same person. The name read, Malcolm Brenner. Date of birth, March 15th, 1942. 82 years old, just as Dayne had estimated, but there was something odd about the card, something that didn't quite fit. In the section where it normally listed the sponsor's branch of service and rank, it was blank, just a dash, as if the information had been deliberately omitted or redacted. And in the section for access authorizations, there was a code Dayne didn't recognize despite his years of experience with military credentials, SAP JWIX 1. SAP, Special Access Program, the highest level of classification, reserved for operations so sensitive that acknowledging their existence could damage national security. JWIX, Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communications System, the network used for top-secret and above communications, but Dayne's irritation overrode his curiosity. The code meant nothing to him in that moment. All he saw was an elderly man with a dependent ID in a space reserved for operators. "Mr. Brenner, this is a dependent ID. This doesn't grant you access to operational facilities. You need to be escorted by active duty personnel at all times when in restricted areas." The old man reached for his spoon again, his fingers closing around it with practiced ease despite the tremor. "I'm eating soup. Sir, I'm asking you politely to come with me. We'll sort this out at the security office, verify your authorization, and get you to wherever you're supposed to be." "I haven't finished my soup." The statement was delivered in the same quiet, matter-of-fact tone, no defiance, no challenge, just a simple truth. Dayne's patience, already worn thin from a morning of bureaucratic frustration, finally snapped. He was a flag officer. He had earned that star through blood and sacrifice, through 20 years of service in the most demanding military organization in the world. He had led men into combat, made life-and-death decisions, carried the weight of command on his shoulders. And this elderly man, this civilian, was treating him like an inconvenience, like a minor annoyance to be ignored while finishing a bowl of soup. "This is not a request." Dayne's voice rose, carrying across the dining facility with the sharp edge of command. Other SEALs looked over, conversations stopping mid-sentence, heads turned, eyes locked on the confrontation. "This is a direct order. Stand up, come with me, now. The old man continued eating his soup. Didn't even look up this time. The spoon moved from bowl to mouth with the same steady rhythm, as if an admiral's order meant nothing, changed nothing, mattered not at all. Dayne felt his face flush with heat. In front of 30 operators, men under his command, men who needed to respect his authority, this elderly civilian was openly ignoring a direct order from a flag officer. It was disrespectful. It was insubordinate. It was unacceptable. It undermined everything he had worked to build, every standard he had fought to maintain. He reached down and grabbed the soup bowl with more force than necessary, pulling it away from the old man in a swift motion that sloshed liquid over the rim. I said now. The old man looked at the empty space where his soup had been, stared at it for a long moment as if trying to understand how something that had been there was suddenly gone. Then he looked up at Dayne, and his pale blue eyes held something now. Not anger, not fear, not even surprise. Something else, something harder to define. Something that made Dayne's absolute certainty waver for just a heartbeat, like a momentary crack in armor. "Young man," the old man said, his voice still quiet but carrying an edge now, a subtle shift in tone that changed everything. "You should put that back." "Or what?" Dayne set the bowl down on the next table with enough force to make it ring against the surface. "You'll report me, sue me, file a complaint? Sir, you are trespassing in a restricted military facility. You are refusing to comply with lawful orders from a superior officer. I could have the master-at-arms here in 2 minutes. I could have you arrested right now for unauthorized access to a secure facility." "You could," the old man agreed, his voice carrying no challenge, just acknowledgement of fact. "Then stand up. Last chance." The old man stood, slowly. His movements were stiff, painful, the movements of someone whose body had been broken and repaired so many times that nothing worked quite right anymore. He was shorter than Dayne had expected, maybe 5'9", possibly less with the stoop of age. Thin to the point of frail, the kind of elderly man you would see at a grocery store moving carefully down the aisles, checking prices, taking his time, representing no threat to anyone or anything, except his eyes. Those pale blue eyes held something that didn't match the frail body at all, something that whispered of danger, of capability, of violence restrained but not forgotten. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Dayne demanded. He was angry now, truly angry, at being made to look foolish in front of his men, at having his authority challenged, at this situation that should have been simple spiraling into something else entirely. The old man was quiet for a long moment. The dining facility had gone completely silent. 30 operators watched, waited, held their breath. The old man seemed to be considering something, weighing options, making a decision. Then, in that rough whisper of a voice, barely audible but somehow carrying to every corner of the room, "They used to call me Payback." The dining facility went absolutely, utterly silent. One of the SEALs at a nearby table, a master chief with 24 years of service, 3 deployments to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq, a chest full of medals and a face that had seen too much, went white as a sheet. His fork clattered to his plate with a sound like a gunshot in the silence. Dayne didn't understand. The word meant nothing to him. "Payback? What kind of call sign is that?" "Sir, I don't have time for games. I don't have time for—" "Admiral?" The Master Chief stood up fast enough to knock his chair backward. His voice was urgent, almost panicked. "Sir, you need to step back, right now." "Excuse me, Master Chief." Dayne turned to him, confused by the sudden intervention, by the fear he saw in the man's eyes. "That's Malcolm Brenner. His call sign was Payback." The Master Chief's voice was shaking, actually shaking, and this was a man who didn't shake for anything. Sir, he's a legend. From Vietnam, from Makvisog, from missions that don't exist in any official record, from operations that are still classified 50 years later." Dayne looked at the old man again, saw the same frail figure, the trembling hands, the weathered face, the discount store clothes. This man is 82 years old. He can barely hold a spoon steady. He's exactly who he says he is. Another voice, coming from the entrance to the dining facility, a voice that carried absolute authority. Every head in the room turned as one. Standing in the doorway was Admiral James Calloway, Chief of Naval Operations, 4 stars on each shoulder board, gleaming in the fluorescent light. The highest-ranking officer in the United States Navy, the man who commanded over 330,000 active-duty sailors, the man whose decisions shaped naval policy and strategy across the globe. He was flanked by 2 aides in crisp uniforms and a civilian wearing a Pentagon security badge that indicated access to the highest levels of classified information. Calloway walked into the dining facility with measured steps, his eyes locked on the old man, on Malcolm Brenner, on Payback. His expression was one of absolute respect mixed with something else, relief, perhaps, or vindication. "Malcolm," Calloway said, and his voice carried a reverence that was absolute, the kind of respect that couldn't be faked or forced. "I'm sorry I'm late. I was told you'd be here at 1300 hours. I should have known you'd arrive early. You always did. Some habits never change." The old man, Payback, nodded slightly. A minimal acknowledgement. "James, you didn't need to come personally. A phone call would have sufficed." "Yes, I did need to come." Calloway walked past Dayne without acknowledging him, without even glancing in his direction, and stopped directly in front of Brenner. "You've refused every invitation for 40 years, refused every ceremony, every medal presentation, every attempt to honor your service. But this one, Malcolm, I told you, this one was not optional. The President himself signed the order. You're getting the recognition you've earned, whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not." Dayne stood frozen, still holding the old man's soup bowl in his hands like an idiot, feeling the world tilt beneath his feet, feeling the ground shift and crack and open up to swallow him whole. Calloway finally turned to look at him, really look at him, and in that gaze, Dayne saw his career hanging by a thread. "Admiral Dayne, why are you holding Mr. Brenner's lunch?" "Sir, I didn't know who he was." The words came out weak, pathetic even to Dayne's own ears. "He didn't have proper authorization to—" "He has authorization that supersedes yours. That supersedes mine. That supersedes everyone in this building." Calloway gestured to one of his aides, who stepped forward with a leather folder stamped with classification markings. "Malcolm Brenner, retired Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy. SEAL Team 1, 1963 to 1967. Mac V. SOG, 1967 to 1972. Call sign, Payback." Calloway opened the folder. His hands were steady, but his voice carried the weight of emotion barely contained. He began reading from documents that Dayne could see were heavily redacted, black bars covering entire paragraphs. Operational record, classified at the highest levels for national security reasons. Confirmed missions, 37 deep reconnaissance operations into North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Missions that officially never happened. Missions that violated international treaties and congressional oversight. Missions that saved American lives when our government denied those Americans even existed. He paused, letting that sink in. Confirmed enemy kills, classified but estimated conservatively at over 100. Some intelligence estimates put it at twice that number. Confirmed rescues of downed pilots and isolated personnel, 14 successful extractions from behind enemy lines, awards and decorations, 3 Navy Crosses, our nation's second highest military honor, 5 Silver Stars, 7 Bronze Stars with Valor, 4 Purple Hearts for wounds received in combat. Calloway's voice thickened with emotion. And a Medal of Honor that was classified for 48 years because the mission it was awarded for was too sensitive to acknowledge. Because admitting what Malcolm Brenner did would have required admitting where we sent him, what we asked him to do, and how many international laws we bent or broke in the process. The dining facility was absolutely silent. 30 operators, men who had seen combat themselves, who had faced enemy fire and made life or death decisions, stood in stunned silence. Mr. Brenner's call sign, Payback, Calloway continued, was not given to him by his teammates. It was given to him by the North Vietnamese. They put a bounty on his head. $50,000 American, more than any other operator, more than any other American in the entire war. They called him the ghost who brings death in their radio communications, They warned each other about him. They feared him. Calloway looked at Brenner, who stood silently, his expression unchanged. They called him that because he had a reputation for never leaving a man behind. Ever. And for always returning to finish missions that failed. When a SEAL team was ambushed in the Mekong Delta and 3 men were listed as MIA, presumed dead, Malcolm Brenner went back. Alone. He penetrated enemy lines, located the bodies, and retrieved all 3 under sustained enemy fire. He carried them out one at a time over the course of 2 days. He did this despite direct orders to stand down, despite being told the men were already dead and the risk wasn't justified. The CNO's voice rose slightly. When a rescue helicopter was shot down with 12 men aboard, SEALs, Air Force pararescue, and a Navy corpsman, and they were trapped behind enemy lines with hundreds of NVA closing in, Malcolm Brenner organized and led the extraction that saved 9 of them. He held off enemy forces for 16 hours, killed an estimated 40 enemy soldiers, was shot twice, and when the rescue bird finally arrived, he was the last man on board. Calloway turned back to Dayne, and his eyes were hard as stone. This man is a living legend. The operations he ran shaped modern special operations doctrine. The tactics he pioneered, solo infiltration, long-range reconnaissance, deep penetration raids, are still taught at Bud S. and at the Naval Special Warfare Center. His after-action reports have been studied by every special operations force in NATO. And you, Admiral Dayne, just confiscated his soup and treated him like a trespasser, like a vagrant who wandered in off the street. Dayne felt his face burning, felt the eyes of every operator in the room on him. Sir, I apologize. I didn't know. His ID didn't show any of this information. It just had a code I didn't recognize. His ID is classified at a level you don't have clearance to fully understand. Calloway interrupted. The access code on it requires special authorization just to read properly. It's compartmented information, because even now, 40 years after the war ended, acknowledging what Malcolm Brenner did, where he served, and who he worked with could still compromise national security, could still expose operations that remain classified, could still endanger people who worked with him and are still alive. Calloway moved closer to Brenner, his voice softening. Malcolm, I apologize. This was not how today was supposed to go. This was not the welcome you deserved. Brenner shrugged slightly, a minimal movement of his thin shoulders. It's fine, James. The young Admiral was doing his job. Security matters. Operational security matters. He saw something that didn't look right, and he acted. That's what he's supposed to do. That's what I would have done. It's not fine. You deserve respect. You've earned it 1,000 times over, 10,000 times over. Calloway gestured to his aide. Get Mr. Brenner fresh soup, hot soup, and inform the ceremony coordinator that we'll be delayed by 30 minutes. I'm not starting until Mr. Brenner has finished his lunch properly. Quietly, with the dignity he deserves. He pulled out a chair at Brenner's table and sat down. The Chief of Naval Operations, 4-star Admiral, the highest-ranking officer in the Navy, sitting down to have lunch with an 82-year-old man in a discount store windbreaker and worn jeans. One of the SEALs, a young operator, maybe 25, approached the table reverently, carrying a fresh bowl of steaming soup. He set it down in front of Brenner with hands that trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from awe. Sir, the SEAL said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, thank you for your service, for everything you did, for all the lives you saved. My father served in Vietnam, Marine Recon. He told me stories about Payback. I thought you were a myth, a legend we told to motivate ourselves. I never thought, I'm real, son, Brenner said gently. Just old, but real. He picked up his spoon with trembling hands. Thank you for your service. Stay safe out there. Watch your six. Trust your training. Bring your brothers home. Yes, sir. I will, sir. Dayne still stood there, frozen like a statue, feeling like he had just stepped on a landmine that hadn't exploded yet, but could at any second. The bowl of confiscated soup was still in his hands, growing cold, a physical reminder of his colossal mistake. Calloway looked at him, really looked at him, and what Dayne saw in those eyes was not just anger, It was disappointment, which was somehow worse. Admiral Dayne. Sit down. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really an order. It was a statement of fact about what was going to happen next. Dayne sat in the chair across from Brenner and Calloway. His dress whites suddenly felt too tight, too constricting, like they were strangling him. His chest felt hollow. You made a mistake, Calloway said bluntly, his voice carrying across the table with brutal honesty. A significant one. A career-defining one. You saw an elderly man and assumed he didn't belong. You saw someone without rank insignia and assumed he hadn't earned respect. You saw someone who didn't fit your mental image of who should be in this space, and you judged based on appearance rather than investigating properly, rather than asking questions, rather than showing even basic curiosity about that classification code on his ID. Sir, I'm not finished. Calloway's voice was hard, unforgiving. In 30 minutes, we're holding a ceremony in the Naval Special Warfare Command Auditorium. 300 personnel will be in attendance. The President has authorized the declassification of certain aspects of Mr. Brenner's service record so that the special operations community can finally understand who he was, what he did, and why it mattered. Calloway leaned back in his chair, his 4 stars catching the light. Mr. Brenner is being awarded the Navy Cross today. Not his 4th one, but a presentation of all 3 that he earned that were previously classified for 48 years. He's being awarded the Defense Superior Service Medal for his contributions to Special Operations Doctrine, tactics that have saved countless lives over 5 decades. And most importantly, he's being publicly presented with the Medal of Honor that he received in secret in 1972 at a ceremony attended by 5 people in a secure facility. Dayne's mouth went dry. The Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration, fewer than 3,500 awarded since the Civil War. And this man, this legend he had just humiliated. The Medal of Honor, Dayne repeated quietly, the weight of his mistake crushing down on him like a physical force. Yes, for actions in Laos in December 1971, he led a rescue mission to extract a downed F-4 Phantom crew. 2 Air Force officers shot down 60 miles inside enemy territory. The mission went bad. Catastrophically bad. Half his team was killed or wounded in an ambush. He made the decision to stay behind, alone, to hold off enemy forces while his remaining team members extracted the wounded. He stayed on the ground for 4 days, evading enemy forces, protecting the wounded, and ultimately bringing out 3 survivors. Calloway's voice dropped. He killed an estimated 40 enemy soldiers in the process. He did it with a broken leg and a bullet through his shoulder. He crawled 4 miles through jungle to reach the extraction point, and when he was finally rescued, he was more concerned about whether his men had made it out than about his own injuries. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Dayne. And you, Admiral Dayne, just confiscated his soup and talked to him like he was a vagrant who stumbled in off the street. Sir, I apologize, I was wrong. I didn't know, but that's not an excuse. I should have investigated, should have asked questions. You should have recognized that classification code, Calloway interrupted. Any flag officer should know what SAP JWIX means, should understand that someone carrying those credentials has access that supersedes normal chains of command, but you didn't, because you were so certain of your authority, so confident in your assessment, that you didn't think you needed to check. You assumed. And in our business, assumptions get people killed. Dayne felt his career crumbling beneath him like sand. Yes, sir. I understand, sir. Do you? Calloway sat back, his expression unreadable. Because I'm about to give you a choice, and your answer will determine whether you keep that star or lose it. Whether you continue in command or spend the rest of your career behind a desk processing paperwork. Whether you have a future in the Navy or whether this is where your service ends. Dayne's throat was tight. He could barely breathe. Yes, sir. Calloway glanced at Brenner, who was eating his soup quietly, seemingly unconcerned with the drama unfolding around him. Then the CNO looked back at Dayne. You humiliated this man in front of his brothers. You treated him with disrespect in a place that should have honored him. Normally, and I want you to understand this clearly, normally I would relieve you of command immediately. You would spend whatever remains of your career behind a desk, If you even kept your commission. What you did was not just a breach of protocol, it was a failure of character, a failure of the basic humanity and humility that every leader must possess. Dayne felt tears threatening. His voice came out as a whisper. Yes, sir. I understand, sir. But, Calloway continued, and that one word hung in the air like a lifeline, Mr. Brenner has requested something different. He doesn't want you relieved. He doesn't want you punished in the traditional sense. He wants something else, something more meaningful. Brenner finally looked up from his soup, his pale blue eyes meeting Dayne's. When he spoke, his rough voice carried a weight that had nothing to do with volume. Admiral, I'm not angry. You were doing your job the way you understood it. But you need to learn something before you command more men, before you have more lives in your hands, before you make decisions that will affect hundreds of warriors. You need to learn that rank doesn't automatically confer wisdom, that youth doesn't mean ignorance and age doesn't mean irrelevance, that an old man eating soup might have more to teach you than any manual you've ever read, any training you've ever received. He set down his spoon carefully. I want you at the ceremony today. I want you to hear my story, the real story, not the sanitized version. I want you to understand why humility matters in leadership, why assumptions are dangerous, why every person you meet, especially the quiet ones, the invisible ones, the ones who don't fit your mental categories, might be carrying a history you can't imagine, a burden you can't comprehend, a lesson you desperately need to learn. Dayne looked at this elderly man, frail and trembling, who had just been revealed as a legend. Sir, I'm truly sorry. I was wrong. I was arrogant. I made assumptions based on appearance, and I disrespected you in a way you absolutely didn't deserve. Apology accepted, Brenner said simply. He picked up his spoon again. Now, are you going to sit there feeling sorry for yourself, or are you going to ask me questions? Because you've got 30 minutes before the ceremony, and I've got 40 years of stories. Some of them might even be useful to a young admiral who's just learned he doesn't know everything. Calloway smiled slightly, the first break in his stern demeanor. That's Malcolm Brenner, 40 years hiding from recognition, refusing every honor. But he'll still teach if someone's willing to learn. He's been doing it his whole life, can't stop himself. Dayne felt something shift inside him. The shame was still there, burning like acid in his gut. But there was something else now. Opportunity. A chance to learn from his mistake rather than just be destroyed by it. Sir, may I ask, why Payback? Why did the North Vietnamese call you that? Brenner took another spoonful of soup, chewed slowly, swallowed. Then he looked at Dayne with those pale blue eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Because I never left a man behind. Ever. Not once in 5 years of operations. If a mission went wrong, if we had to retreat, if men were lost or captured or left behind, I went back. Always. Sometimes it took days, sometimes weeks. But I went back. That was my promise to every man I served with. You come with me. I bring you home. Dead or alive, you're coming home. His voice grew distant, remembering. The enemy learned that any ambush, any attack that wounded or killed Americans in my area of operations, I would return for them. And when I came back, I brought violence with them. Payback. They started using the word in their radio communications. We had interpreters who picked it up. Payback is coming. Payback was here. Avoid Payback's territory. It became my call sign because the enemy named me before my own side did. How many times did you go back? Dayne asked, leaning forward despite himself, drawn into the story. 17 confirmed missions that made it into official reports. Probably a dozen more that never got documented because they were solo operations that command didn't officially authorize. I just went. Brenner's hands tightened on the spoon. The worst was March 1970. A 6-man SEAL team got ambushed near the Laotian border. 3 killed instantly by an RPG strike. 3 missing, presumed captured or dead. Command wrote them off within 6 hours. Too deep in enemy territory. Too risky. Intelligence said there were 3 NVA battalions in the area. It was a death trap. He paused, his weathered face showing the weight of memory. But one of those missing men was Dany Cruz, 23 years old, from San Diego, same as me. He had a wife named Maria and a baby daughter named Sophia who was born while he was deployed. He'd never met her, carried her picture in his helmet, talked about her every damn day, about how he couldn't wait to hold her, to see her smile, to be her father. Brenner's voice cracked slightly. I couldn't let him die without meeting his daughter. I just couldn't, so I went back alone. Didn't ask permission, didn't tell anyone, just grabbed my gear and went. Alone? Dayne couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. Into enemy territory with 3 battalions. Being alone was an advantage. Smaller signature, easier to hide, faster to move. One man can go places a team can't. Brenner's eyes were far away now, seeing a jungle 50 years gone. I spent 4 days tracking, found 2 of them dead within 12 hours. They'd been executed, hands bound, single shots to the head. I marked their locations for later recovery. Found Dany on day 3. He was alive. Barely. He had a bullet through his stomach, infected, festering. Hadn't eaten in 3 days. Couldn't walk. Fever so high he was delirious. He thought I was a hallucination at first. Kept saying, "You're not real. Payback's not real. You're just fever dreams." Dayne could hear the emotion thick in the old man's voice. I carried him 18 miles to an extraction point. He weighed 160. I weighed 140 soaking wet. I carried him on my back for 18 miles through jungle and mountains, through enemy patrols and checkpoints, through terrain that would challenge a healthy man with no load. Got shot twice doing it, once in the arm, once in the leg. But I got him out, got him to a hospital. He lived. Brenner's hands trembled as he lifted his spoon. He got to meet his daughter, got to hold Sophia, got to be her father for 37 more years before cancer took him in 2007. At his funeral, Sophia, grown woman by then, with kids of her own, she told me that everything in her life, every good thing, every accomplishment, existed because I brought her father home. Her children existed because I brought her father home. He looked directly at Dayne. That's why they called me Payback, Admiral. Because I paid the enemy back for every American they touched. Because I made sure our people came home. Because that was the promise. The only promise that really mattered. The dining facility was silent except for Brenner's voice. Every operator in the room was listening now, drawn in by the